Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We're just doing a really quick overview of a preseason 2021 champion class item goals that Riot just posted up about 11 hours ago. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check out the stream. Starts around midnight every night. Eastern Standard Time. Usually goes till about 4 or 5 a.m. Very friendly, chill community. We'd love to see you. And if you like more analytical content like this, check out the rest of the offerings on the channel. We do tier lists, patch notes, and many other guides on the channel every single patch. Okay, so I just want to go through this here really quickly. There's not a ton of like super specific updates, but I just want to talk about this theoretically. And I'll link, if I remember to, I'll link either at the end of this video or right at the beginning here my take on itemization and what I would like to see and what I think would be ideal for itemization. I made that probably a few months, maybe 1 month ago, 2 months ago. In June when they first started mentioning they were going to change items in the preseason. So you can check that out. Talks a little bit about theoretically what I think the biggest problems are with itemization right now and what I would like to see in a perfect world. So I'll go ahead and link that at the beginning of this video, so be sure to check that out if you're interested. Okay. And they're doing some of the things, or at least they're recognizing some of the problems that I mentioned, although not necessarily recognizing some of the others. Okay, so stats and effects. So healing and grievous wounds. I think that this is something that is problematic because it's a paper, rock, scissors approach, and Riot traditionally has not liked to do that, and I think that's wise. Other games like Dota, I'm not an expert on Dota, from what I hear, there are a lot more hard counter itemization, hard counter champions in the game, versus League tries to be something to where certain things are good against other things, but they don't necessarily hard counter it. So something like Randuin's Omen, for example, is very good against Critical Strike, but it doesn't hard counter it, right? And so the thing is, Grievous Wounds is supposed to hard counter healing, and you see this against things like Soraka, against things like Mundo, champions that are very heal-intensive champions, basically lose 40% of their effectiveness off of Grievous Wounds right now. So it's like they're super overpowered if the enemy team doesn't get Grievous Wounds, like Soraka, but they can potentially feel sort of underpowered if they do get Grievous Wounds. So it's very situational and too determined by items, so I agree that this is a problem. So how would I do it? I would probably, honestly, just remove Grievous Wounds as a stat and just lower healing across the board. I do think they need to lower healing. I think in general there is too much, so how they've tried to counter this with Grievous Wounds is just put just an insane amount of healing that's available, particularly for bruisers, through runes, through items, and they just tried to say, okay, they're basically assuming everyone's going to get Grievous Wounds, and then they think that healing might be under control if everyone gets it. So it's pretty much like you have to get Morellonomicon or Executioners in a lot of games. But the problem is, in like Gold and lower, a lot of people won't get it, and it also puts a tax on your build that hasn't really been fully optimized yet. So champions that can afford to get that, like champions that really want the spell pin, that don't need the mana, that would really be able to leverage the Grievous Wounds off of a completed Morellonomicon, are going to be very strong, versus other champions that maybe don't want that, champions that want, more CDR, or champions that want, other stats aren't going to like that as much. So anyways, how are they trying to address this? Okay, healing has become so common that it's a mandatory choice. True. Okay, we're looking across runes to trim some healing that we think are unnecessary, which should reduce the necessity of getting Grievous Wounds. True. Okay, so I talked about this in that itemization video that I just linked a little bit ago, so go check that out. But the stuff where I think they could very easily trim it, definitely off of Conquer. I think that Conquer, it already gives a lot of AD, that's fine. It gives adaptive damage. Its main purpose should be an offensive champion that wants to be more powerful in longer fights, in longer exchanges. That's it. It serves that purpose. Give it, if they have to give it a little bit more raw AD or raw AP or whatever, that's fine, but take the healing off of it. There's no reason that it needs to be able to heal. So anyways, I think you could take it off of Conquer. I think that you might be able to trim it off of something like Death's Dance, take it down to 10%, or maybe 12%, something like that. I think you could trim it on Blade of the Ruined King, take that down from 12% to 10%. I think you could trim a couple of things on those really powerful items. Ravenous Hunter is probably fine because you have to go into, you have to go out of your way to get that. Triumph, I think, is a little strong. They could probably trim it there. I think it's 12% heal right now. They could probably take that down to 10%. So that's what I would do, is just knock off a couple of percentage points, especially off the runes. Just remove it from Conquer altogether. If people want the healing, the sustained stuff, they can get Fleet Footwork. That's fine. So I think having some healing options in there, like Bloodline, like Fleet Footwork, are fine, but when it's comes stock on items that already have really powerful offensive capabilities, most notably Conquer, but also Death's Dance and Blatherin King, when it's in abundance, I just think that's too much, and that's free. They could nerf tank stuff like Spirit Visage to make it to where it's only your healing effects are 30%, so that it isn't like if someone has that, then it's not too strong with Soraka or with Redemption and things like that, but I think that would be a good start. Now, as to what they do with Grievous Wounds, I think that they should make Oblivion Orb apply the Grievous Wounds effect, and Executioners can, but maybe dial it back. If you're going to dial back the healing overall, dial back the Grievous Wounds, maybe make it 30% instead of 40% right now. So that way people don't have to buy it as much, but it's still kind of useful, but doesn't necessarily hard counter. Grievous Wounds can sometimes feel underpowered to stop a strong healer, true. Looking to make Grievous Wounds a sharper effect that more effectively counters extreme healing situations and gives up. So, okay, I don't like that. So they're doubling down on the hard counter. So they're saying that you shouldn't have to buy it all the time, but when you do buy it, it's really going to murder Soraka and Mundo. So I don't like that approach. So this stuff I like, this I don't like, but we'll see how it goes. Okay, cooldown reduction. Now, this is something that I read through that I really, really disagree with, because I think this is going to be very confusing for a lot of people and just very weird. So what they're saying is that CDR stacks linearly, or like that it stacks multiplicatively rather than linearly, which the way that they're looking at this, I think is unintuitive, and a lot of people don't think about it that way, and it's assuming perfect cast, which is not clear. So, for example, if you have 20%, like they're working out the math here, if you have 10% CDR, you get 11% more casts. Right? So if something had a 100 seconds or whatever off of it, you're taking it down to 90 second CD, then what you're reducing is, like, you're bringing it down 1/9 or something like that to get to 11%. It's this really unintuitive thing, or like when it's being reduced by 40%, you're getting 66% more casts off of it. When it's reduced by 50%, you're getting 100% more cast. But the thing is, you're not casting stuff on cooldown every time. You know, every time your Janna ult is up, you're not casting it. So that's not really, like, a fair comparison, I don't think, to say if you have a 50% cooldown on a Janna ult that's 150 seconds, you know, that you're going to be casting Janna ults 100% more of the time. I think it's a lot more intuitive to say, this is reducing the cooldown on this ability by a certain percentage. You can cast it as much as you want. We know sometimes you won't cast it directly when it's off cooldown, but that is giving you a very clear idea of how many seconds are being removed from the cooldown of the ability, not how many casts in a perfect theoretical situation you could crank. So I just think that that's really unintuitive. So, like, what they want to do is they want to turn it to something called 10 ability haste, which means you get 10% more abilities that you can cast. 20 is 20% more abilities you can cast. So it's just going to be very unintuitive. It's like, okay, so okay, sorry, I just got an email from someone from the university. Anyways, so it's like, okay, so you can cast 30% more abilities, but what does that mean? It's like, all right, if I have something that's 120 second cooldown, what does that mean? And they're like, oh, well, that's going to reduce the cooldown on your ability by 26.73%, right? It's going to reduce it, you know, by 25.2 seconds. It's just like, it's not going to make a lot of sense to measure it that way. People are going to be like, what the hell does this stat, like, actually mean? People are going to get it just because more casting is better on a lot of champions, but it just seems like a really weird way, because you're going to end up with all these fractions and just weird-ass numbers that are going to be unintuitive, because they're basing it off of how many spells you could cast in an ideal situation where you're just literally spamming the ability on cooldown. So, I don't know. It seems unintuitive to me. It seems weird. And they say it's not going to be a 1-to-1 conversion from CDR to spell haste because that would be a nerf, and they don't. That's not their intention. So they want it to be balance neutral. It's just going to be murkier, but the way you get there is more linear. I don't know how that's not a nerf. Like, is it a nerf or is it a buff? It's worth noting that armor, magic resist, attack speed, and other stuff already scale that way. I don't think that's true. Like, armor and magic resist scale multiplicatively with, like, diminishing returns. Like, yes, so, like, basically 100 armor reduces physical damage dealt by 50%. That's the exact inverse of what CDR does. You have 50% CDR, you can cast 100% more spells. So they both are working in sort of this multiplicative way. Attack speed scales up based on a multiplicative modifier with your base attack speed. So all of them have this same kind of scaling. It's just really weird. I won't go into all the details of it, but I'll just say that it's weird, and it sounds like it's going to be a nerf, because it sounds like earlier on that it's just a really weird way of looking at it. So I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes, but I really don't like that because that's very bizarre. Ability haste is uncapped is what they're saying. So now that we have so there's no longer a 40% cap with the new linear scaling model. You don't need this restriction anymore. It opens up some cool build paths. So basically, to get to the old, like, if you had 50% CDR reduction, that would be the same as 100 spell haste. So now you'd have to get the 100% spell haste to get to the same as 50% CDR. You'd effectively have to get to 80 spell haste in order to get to the 40% CDR limit. So they say it's uncapped, but realistically with your items, this just smells like a bunch of, like, lawyer speak in order to say that CDR is going to be nerfed. Pretty much is how I'm reading this, but we'll see how it goes. And obviously that's going to, benefit champions that don't rely heavily on CDR. So stuff that auto attacks a lot, stuff that has, like, full CDR, resets, things like Master Yi that gets a reset, or Katarina or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I don't like this one at all. It just feels really weird. I think CDR is fine. Like, why mess with it? Most champs want to get a lot of CDR. I would put more CDR in the game, actually, because I think casting abilities is fun. People like to cast abilities. So I don't know. This just seems really clumsy, and it's like, why mess with it? But anyway, so they're trying to spin it into something positive. I think it's going to be a nerf to a lot of champs that rely heavily on CDR. And that's particularly, like, champs that are really ult reliant, like a lot of supports are, to be really effective. Okay, so tenacity. So basically, tenacity is going to apply to knockups. I love that. I think that that's just, knockups should not be able to circumvent all tenacity in the game. So I think that's really standard. They're not applying to pulls or knockbacks. That makes sense because those are displacements. That would just feel really funky if, like, a blitz hook didn't pull you all the way in. If it pulled you, like, a third less of the distance because it is considered, because it would be reduced by tenacity. That just feels weird. So yeah, I agree with that. But it definitely should affect knockups. So that's great. I love the change. And with some stuff where they really need it for the animation or just for the champion to feel right, they're going to add suppression onto it. So like a Vi ult, for example, they're going to make that a suppression instead of just a knockup. So I think that's good. I like that move. It makes it a lot more clear when you should be getting tenacity, when you shouldn't. So now it's like pretty much any form of CC that's not a suppression, tenacity is going to work. And then if you do want stuff where it's like a marquee effect of a champ and they have to have that CC, or there's some other kind of counterplay to it, then they can make it suppression. So I like that. Good change. Okay, jungle items. So now they're going to make jungle items. You choose a starting item, and it works toward, like, it just upgrades all the time. So this is going to save a lot of gold for a lot of junglers because you just never have to upgrade it. And I guess it's based on how much you farm your camps in the jungle. It would upgrade, I assume. Or maybe kills and assists would count as well. This is kind of weird. Like, they did this with supports, and I like this a lot, to where you had different sorts of goals or ways that you could upgrade your support item. So they aren't really specific for how they're going to do this, but if there's going to be like an AP one, an AD one, so you work towards Runic Echoes, you work towards Warrior, and you work towards Blood Razor. So the weird thing is that like those are on different power spikes a lot of times. Like Warrior, you want to complete really early, and it's super impactful in the early game. But something like Runic Echoes, sometimes people can wait on that a little bit, or it's a lot less impactful super early in the game. And then Blood Razor is like just really rare. So I don't know how they're going to do this, and it doesn't affect the smite. I personally don't like being able to smite champions. I think smite should just be something for camps. So I think that whole system, like choosing challenging smite or blue smite, it's kind of weird. I don't like it anyway. So if they got rid of that, the main reason is because a lot of people will smite somebody in a fight and then they won't have the smite for a dragon or baron. And so I don't know. I guess that's an interesting choice. Do you use the smite in the fight or do you hold it for the dragon after the fight? But I don't know. So they're still working out the details. How do you acquire a champion targeted smite with that? But I like the idea in general of freeing up gold so that they can pick other items that are going to be more unique for the specific champion, right? So it's like, okay, you can't buy Warrior anymore, right? Yes, it was very efficient, but if you're still getting like, maybe they just make one item that has adaptive force or something on it. I don't know. Like, in theory, so it's going to make the item weaker. It depends on if you're going to be able to get it from farming or ganking or both. Maybe if you get a successful, like, kill or an assist, it counts as, like, 2 camps towards the credit. So maybe once you clear, I don't know, 6 camps, it upgrades to the level 2 item. I'm not really sure. Maybe there can be versions like support that have an AP and an AD version for the different types. I'm not really sure, but I kind of like the idea of being able to start building out items earlier so that you can kind of choose how you want to budget. Obviously, this is going to be super good on champions that don't really care about their items early. So like Ivern is a great example. Really doesn't care about the jungle item early on anyways. Other champions that need to rush Warrior specifically, I think will be hurt by this. There are some champs that, like, maybe the Cinder Hulk champs aren't necessarily going to care if they get this early. Like, they'll get it for the wave clear probably, but if they don't have to buy it early, if they can spend more money on something else, that's probably really good, because Cinder Hulk kind of sucks early, honestly. Like, it's the best scaling one, I think, over time if you get a lot of HP, but it's really weak early. You just kind of get it just because, you know, for the wave clear early on. So that's going to be really nice. It seems like for Cinder Hulk junglers, bad for Warrior junglers, and the other two, I don't know. Okay, so decent idea. We'll see how they execute it, though. If it strictly favors farm-heavy junglers, if it's just like you clear so many camps and your item upgrades, that's going to be a really, really big hit to early game junglers like Lee Sin, Xin Zhao. Like, these heavy gank junglers are going to suffer, and the power farm will be better. Okay, Marksman. So, more strategic choices. They suffer from too many must-build items in their build that crowd out. So, like, Marksman is the most problematic role, and I talk about this a lot in that video, so be sure to check that out, the itemization video I was mentioning. But Marksman, there's always an extremely narrow meta with Marksman because they're all trying to do the same thing, which is ranged, scaling, physical attack, damage dealer. That's it. And so it just comes down to, well, what's the best way to do that? Is it crit? Is it on hit, or is it lethality? Historically, those are the 3 things. And once you figure that out, and usually there's only one of those that's the best. Once you figure that out, then you just figure out which champ does that the best. So like right now, it's like, okay, we're in a push-poke meta. It's Caitlyn, right? We're playing Caitlyn all the time. Maybe Ashe. It's just all about that critical strike. And then the on-hit champs are just bad. So you've got like on-hit Varus, Vayne, stuff like that. The Gensu's users just aren't really that strong right now. And lethality ADCs haven't really been a thing in a while, just because if they buff the lethality items too much, then stuff like the assassins would be too strong, the Zeds, the Talons, and stuff like that, and they're already really good. So they need more diversity, and they say the exact opposite here, agency options. Overall, we think Okay, so common marksman report is that they're powerful but overly team reliant. This is another thing, is they're almost always glass cannon, have to have really good protection, and they're OP on 3 items, so they're really strong in pro, but they're really weak in solo queue because they don't get the proper protection, and game snowballs so fast, out of control, that you just can't be that strong. And so it's like, if you give them too much power early on, but they're still really good late, so like if Blade of the Ruined King is really OP as a first item on them, but then they're still like ridiculously strong once they get their Hurricane and their Ginsus later, if it's like a Vayne or something, then that's just too powerful. It's too strong. And so they have to like keep them suppressed early for pro, but they want them to have this late game power curve. Whereas I think that there needs to be just many more types of champs that are viable. And you see this, I talked about this in a video that I just made, but if we get Lolalytics here, this is how it almost always looks. Like, look at the pick rates here, right? Like, Caitlyn's 30% right now pick rate. Ezreal's 29. Then you have 18, 15. It's because they're all trying to do the same thing, but there's always, like, 3 marksmen that just do it better than anyone else, depending on what the situation is. Versus mid lane, right? There's only 2 champs that are over a 10% pick rate right now. Top lane, 2 champs that are over a 10% pick rate. But for some reason, or 1 champ, for some reason, they think that ADC is like this sacred thing where it has to be the same type of champion. Like, why? Why can't you have a mage in the bot lane? Why can't you have someone who's super good, like a bruiser that's like strong in the bot lane early? Pro teams are experimenting with that. You've seen like the Taric Sona in the past. You've seen Yuumi Garen in the bot lane a little bit in pro last year. Right now you're seeing like some Sona Lux in the bot lane. So people are trying that. And there was a meta, they tried to do this in Season 8 where they had like Swain and Vlad and some of these other champs that were viable bot lane, Yasuo. But the ADCs just threw their hands up in the air, especially the pro ADCs. They're like, oh my god, I have to learn something other than a physical range damage dealer. This is terrible. Especially like Doublelift, where Doublelift's cool, I like him a lot, but he was the one that was crying the most. And it's like, dude, every other role has to deal with that. Right? Top laners have to deal with that constantly, whether they're playing tanks or carries or split pushers or team fighters. Junglers deal with a million changes every season. Mid laners have to be proficient on a bunch of different champs. Why does ADC get a free pass in pro play? Why can we say, oh, it's okay, I've been playing Ezreal, Kai'Sa, and Varus for 5 years. I haven't had to adapt at all. Like, I don't know. It just seems a little disingenuous. Like, ADC at the pro level should have to adapt some. It's like the only role where it's like the same 5 champions for like the end of all time, you know, are good. And they've tried to fix this a little bit by just making overpowered AD carries that do everything, that are good early and good late and have a ton of utility, right? Like Aphelios, Kai'Sa, Senna, all of the new champs, they've just tried to give them so much stuff that they just outshine every other ADC. So just open it up a little bit, do it properly. Their problem in Season 8 when they tried to do that was they just very obviously nerfed crit a lot. And it was terrible the way they managed crit. But, you know, they should just open it up and allow some more stuff down there. Allow, like, some of these on-hit champions down there that want attack speed. So something like Kennen, you know, on-hit Kennen, on-hit Nico. The problem is some of those things can be too strong in the top lane if they're too good. So you got to play around that. But I would like to see more stuff like Nico, like a Kennen, like maybe a Quinn or something like that in the bot lane. Just some kind of range champ that could have some diversity in there. And it's not an easy task to do because you're splitting experience. So a lot of those champs, you know, are balanced around. They need to be higher levels so their abilities do more damage. And it gets really complicated. I'll talk about it more in the itemization. But I don't necessarily like what they're saying about this, where they say, overall, we think this is a fundamental and healthy element for the class because it creates a differentiated set of roles to create a rich template and strategy. It's not differentiated. If you look every single season, ADC is the most narrow role by a very, very large margin. Like I said, it's the only role where you will consistently see 2 or 3 champions with a 25% plus pick rate because it's the least diverse role. It's the worst designed role. Imagine how much less strategy there would be if every class was the same. They are all the same. ADCs are trying to do the same thing. Look at mid lane. Look at top lane. They're very successful. People like playing those roles. They're often considered very powerful roles because they're diverse. You can play assassins. You can play some tanks. You can play control mages. Hell, you can even play some ADCs in the mid lane from time to time, like a Lucian or a Vayne top or something like that. Like, those roles are just so much better balanced. So maybe some of this other stuff will help. Some of these other item changes they're going to talk about here in a second. But I just think that in general, this philosophy that it is very strong and it is good just to have marksmen, like, do exactly what they're supposed to do. I think that's a bad way of looking at it. It's a very poorly designed role, and everybody knows that. Okay, we think we can introduce some items that allow marksman player to opt into more tools to help them survive when not supported by a coordinated team. Okay, I like that. That's good. But these won't be free. They'll come at the... you'll have less than their best-in-class DPS. Okay, that's fair. So I guess they're adding some more early game, but not making it late game. More impactful on one item. Got to be careful, because you're going to have to lower their impact with a bunch of items. Big problem with that is crit or Gensus, right? So you just have to decide how strong are they going to be over the course of a game. You do not want them to be too strong on one item, but an AD armor item is probably good, but that might make them OP if it's too strong. But I do, I kind of like that there could be an armor like, or an item like that, but more spellcaster marksman options. So what is a spellcaster marksman? Ezreal, basically? Maybe Varus or something? Ezreal's already, he's just always relevant in pro. Anyways, alright, so this, I like some of this stuff. I like these last two are like, okay, you gotta be careful with a single impact, but I completely disagree that is a healthy way to function, to have everyone compete for the same niche, which is best ranged physical damage dealer, because it just leads to horrible lack of diversity. Okay, mage items. First choice items. So mages today suffer from a set of items that don't have clear trade-offs or situational purpose, making their first item choice basically predetermined in each meta based on which item is tuned the strongest. I disagree with that too. I think that mages have some of the best itemization options. Yeah, there are some, sure, that are problematic, but like right now you can rush Protobelt, you can rush Ludens, depending on, yes, each champ is going to have one item that's probably the best on him. That's just how it's going to be on most champions. But I don't think that certain items in the mage position right now are overly determining, like, the chance you can build. I mean, yes, it's mostly assassins here, but a lot of these are potentially building different things, right? Like Katarina's rushing Gunblade, Ari's probably rushing Ludens, or maybe GLP. Galio's rushing Protobelt. Zed is most likely rushing Ghostblade or Dustblade. Echo's rushing Protobelt. So yeah, there are some Protobelt users that are strong right now, right? Like Galio's probably Protobelt. Then you have Echo's Proto, Fizz is Proto. And they're going to be getting, Hourglass with that. Diana's probably going to be Proto Hourglass. So yeah, Protobelt's a little on the strong side. But there are plenty of champs that don't use Protobelt right now. So I think when you compare that with something like Marksman, whereas like almost every Marksman is going to be rushing Infinity Edge that's in the meta right now, there are a couple of exceptions, but a lot of them are. I think that Mage is fine. Double Pen is another one. If you want to go Sork Boots and then work your way towards Morellonomicon, that's also a build that's fairly popular with some champions out there. So anyways, I think that Mages are fine. Late options are pretty rich with some unique counter effects and actives. I don't know. Rich choices off first. I mean, okay. I mean, more items, more choices is good, but I don't think mages are in that tough of a spot. Fantasy item for artillery mages. Is it good or not? I just hate the word fantasy and fun and stuff, because it's like, who cares? Like, is it a good item or not? So they're trying to make like a better Ludens or something. I guess. Those champs, the problem is, if those champs are too strong, there's like no counterplay to Xerath. And very little counterplay to like Ziggs if their items are just too OP in the meta, because they're so long range. It's very, very difficult to deal with them. So I don't know about buffing them up, but okay. Haste as a choice. Rework from cooldown reduction, ability haste. We can use the stats. Okay, so they're nerfing it so they can put it on more items. Super haste focused builds. I mean, you do have basically GLP or Ludens. I agree that like you have to, a lot of mages, if they don't go proto belt, they do have to go for Ludens or GLP because they need the mana, they need the CDR. I would like to see more CDR. You know, they could. I talk about this in the itemization video, so check that out. But like on things like utility items like Rylai's or like Leon trees that aren't like the really heavy hitting spell pin items or death cap, I think you could put some effective CDR on those items and just nerf their AP a little bit, make them more utility focused. Especially something like Rylai's, I think would fit right in with like a utility control type of mage. I like that idea. Okay, AP Fighter, AP Assassin, tailored early item builds. These AP champs been borrowing from mage items. Yes, okay. We want to offer some early buy choices that match the patterns and stats they want. It's called Proto Belt. They already get it. Right? That's something that Orianna doesn't want Proto Belt, but Fizz, Echo, Diana, all of those want Proto Belt, and Proto Belt's like really, really strong right now. So I guess they want to add in more stuff like that. It feels like Proto Belt and Zanya's are already super good on AP Assassin, so I'm not sure that they need much more than that. Things like damage, durability, hybrid, and manaless items. I don't know if you need damage, durability, hybrids, because you already have that once again with Proto Belt with the health and with Zanya's with the AD. Manaless item is a very good idea, though. I think that would help out champs like Kennen. You got to be careful, though, with someone like Akali and those items, but okay, more items, sure. Bridge in a tank or pure AP later on fighters. So there's, what are they thinking? Like Echo or Diana? Tank or pure AP to finish off their builds. Maybe or they want to make Lichbane a little bit stronger or something into like a Trinity Force type of item. I don't know, sure. I think it could be interesting. AD fighter items. Now, I think these are already really strong. Like, if you're thinking like Irelia and stuff like that, you've already got Blade the Ruined King, which is great. You already have Death's Dance. You already have Sterix. You already have GA. Like, there's so many items. And then if you need it, like Black Cleaver, Trinity Force. Like, there's so many AD items that are really strong right now in fighters. Totally disagree with them needing more tools. You've got Death's Dance. Unless they're planning to remove Death's Dance or nerf it or Bork. Like, I don't feel sorry for fighters at all. Aren't enough decisions being made around fighters in the early build. We want to sharpen the current options and introduce some new ones. Okay, I guess. I think it's fine, but sure. AD Assassin items. AD Assassins have the best item pathing in the entire game, and I talk about that in my itemization video, because they're all so modular. You just buy a bunch of longswords, you get a bunch of CDR and lethality off of Dirk's and Caulfield's Warhammers, and you have so many utility items. Like, you have Umbral Glaive, which can clear wards and is a really cheap item at 2,400. You have Ghostblade, gives you extra movement speed, extra roaming. You have Dustblade for extra burst. You have Edge of Night for a free bubble to help you out against hooks. Like, what do you want? You have 4 different items. You can literally build them in any order, and they all like build out of very cheap items, and they're all about the same cost, and they're completely modular. So you can get something like a Serrated Dirk and say, you know what, I want to get a Ghostblade. And then you can think like 5 minutes later, I'm snowballing pretty hard. I think I want to transition and get a Dustblade instead. Or you could say, wow, they keep seeing me on Vision. I'm not getting good ganks off. Let me go ahead and grab an Umbral. So you have so many, like, not only good build paths, but because it's modular, because certain items build out of the same items, you can change your mind mid-build and adjust as the game unfolds. Almost no other like build has that, right? You know, with AD like Marksman, it's like, okay, you're building Infinity Edge, you're locked in, it sucks. You have to buy a BF sword, you have to buy a pickaxe, all of these expensive items that really determine your back timings. I talk about that more in the video, don't want to get too far in the weeds here. But AD Assassins have the best build, I think, in terms of choices. I mean, the only other thing that's close are like the fighters, the stuff with like the Death's Dance and the Blade of the Ruined King and stuff like that. They have so many good options too. But AD Assassins are just spoiled with way too many options. Maybe Enchanters. Enchanters are very modular too, with like Forbidden Idol and Fairy Charms and Amp Tomes and stuff. Like a bunch of cheap components, really cheap items. You can get Redemption, Ardent Censer, Mikhail's, Athene's Unholy Grail out of very, very Shirelia's out of very similar items. So maybe Enchanters have better like build options, but AD Assassins are certainly really far up there. intentional late build options. They should be terrible in the late game. Like, you can't have someone that can snowball and go like 10-0 in the first 10 minutes and just completely take over a game and just say like, well, oops, I didn't have an early game, so I'm going to by default have a really good late game. It's like, no, that's the trade-off. You're playing an AD assassin who can be super OP like Zed or Talon. If you get kills, you should suck later. If you don't get kills or you don't close out the game, you should be bad. You shouldn't have it both ways. Just like the marksman shouldn't be really strong early and overpowered late, AD assassins should not be overpowered early but still strong late, even if they don't close out the game. So I don't like that. I think that if they're going to have them be as strong as they are, if they want to do this, if they want to make them viable later in the game, they need to dial back the early game stuff, like the damage proc off of Dustblade or nerf Ignite or something, because if they make them too good late, then it's not going to be... And what do you mean by, like, good late as well? Like, I think they should be terrible against tanks. If they get access to, like, an Enchanter or an AD Assassin, yes, they should be able to blow them up. But Assassins, you know, later in the game, it should be all about positioning, flanking, getting proper vision, and, you know, taking out one of the squishy backliners. If they can go up and just go toe-to-toe with, like, you know, Volibear or Nunu or something on the front line, it's a huge problem. They shouldn't be able to do that. So anyways, we'll see how that goes. I don't like the sound of some of that, but, you know, they could make it work. Tank items, more options to adapt to team strategy. Okay, they already have a lot of good reactive items, I think. Like, you've got Thornmail, you got Randuin's, and then on the magic resist side, you know, you've got Adaptive Helm and Spirit Visage and Abyssal Mask. So some of them are a little weak, but I think the items are there. They just need to buff the stats a little bit. Do you need to match the split pushing of Tryndamere? Well, you shouldn't be able to do that as a tank. If Tryndamere gets to 3 or 4 items, you shouldn't be able to match him 1v1 in a split push. That's his whole thing. Match hard engage on Azir, protect a Kog'Maw. Okay, I guess that's interesting, except for the split pushing. Don't like that. Maokai should not be able to hang with Tryndamere at 4 items. Filled out magic resist options. Magic resist is the best they have right now. Multiple AP playstyles. Yeah, they have like protection against like some protection against burst, and then they also have the sustained damage protection with blanking out the item. But anyways, I think they have options there. Tank utility. Create value for their team by being immovable tank soaks while providing CC. Okay, so more like Locket or Knight's Vow type of stuff. Okay, I'm down for that. Late game capstone items. Like okay, so a death cap type of item. I mean, what would that be? Like a health scaling item? Warbogs or something? Do you really want that in the game? I guess. I mean, they are lacking, like, a lot of times, oh my god, this item's, like, this is the ticket if I can build up for this late game item, but is that real? That's, like, more of a carry mentality, I feel like, tanks. Tanks need to be reactive, responding to threats modularly, right? Like, adjusting your item from case to case instead of building linearly towards very specific power spikes. It's just a different style of play, I think. I think that's fine, but I don't think you should be aiming for a specific capstone item as a tank. I think you should just be adjusting every item based on what's going on in the game. I think that's one of the cool things, that it's got really reactive builds. So, I don't know. I think that tanks could use a little help. I would look at Frozen Heart. I think it's a really interesting item that's just, like, undercosted. They need to just take some mana, or just, like, some of these stats that a lot of tanks don't need as much, and just give them more, like, interesting stuff. CDRs would be very nice on some of those items, too. Enchanter items, more options for build variety. Like I just said with Assassins, it's literally the best build path in the game, are Enchanter items, because there's like 5 different items that all build out of similar pieces, and you can adjust based on what's going on in the game. It's like, okay, you have a bunch of bruisers on your team, you need to engage more? Boom, we got Shirelias. You want to team fight better? Boom, we got Redemption. You want to cleanse CC? Boom, we got Mikhail's. You want to buff up your auto attackers, your AD carries? Alright, we got Ardent Sensor, right? And in some situations, it's like, okay, you need a big shield for your team. All right, we got Locket, right? There is all these different builds and items that you can get that are already like super strong. You want something where you deal damage and basically spell vamp and pass that on to other people. Boom, we got Athenes. So I think the enchanters have like the best items with assassins, because they both have like 4 different options that all build out of the same stuff. They're all cheap. So I don't know. What are the underused items into viable choices to create? I don't know. I mean, more items is good, but solve active overload. More than any other class, enchanter items end up with more actives. Yes, but that's a good thing. That's fun, because it's like you have extra ults, because you, like, as an enchanter, you have more like brain power available to make decisions like that around item actives, because you don't have to last hit. So you can use more of your focus on leveraging item actives. I think item actives are really cool. Like risk reward, that's how you can really differentiate good supports from bad supports a lot of times, are the item actives. I think that's really fun. And there aren't too many actives right now. So I don't like this. I mean, what are you going to get? You're going to get like 1 Shirelia's or 1 Redemption in a lot of games. Maybe a Mikhail's. Like, it's very rare that you would have 3 item actives. I guess maybe you could get like Redemption plus Mikhail's plus Shirelia's, and maybe you have 3 item actives. But it seems like a lot of people, there's going to be an Athenes mixed in there somewhere. There's going to be an Ardent Censer mixed in there somewhere on a lot of enchanters. So I don't know. I think that item actives are cool, and that they should do more of those with support, because I think that's something that makes support feel very unique compared to other roles. Is basically like you get 2 or 3 extra ultimates with your item actives that you get to manage to kind of show off some of your brain power, where you can't do that as easily with last hitting minions and stuff like that. Like it's a skill check that I think is good. So hopefully they don't hit that too much. And it's fun. I like item actives. I think they're cool. A couple of items fall into the good at everything category, where they provide defense, CDR, healing, mana regen, and an active. Okay, there's only one item that meets all of those criteria that I can think of, and that's Redemption. I mean, if they're talking about Ardent Censer, Ardent has no defense. I guess maybe Mikhail's. Defense, CDR, healing, mana regen. Okay, so Mikhail's and Redemption. And Mikhail's is still very rare in solo queue. In pro, it's good, but... I mean, if they want to focus on the purpose... I mean, like, what would you nerf? Take off... I guess you could take off the HP and, like, buff up the plus healing or something. Athenes is probably... It's not an active, but it's probably... Athenes is the one that's too good all around. But, like, you can mess this up. If you miss your Redemption, it's very inefficient if you get a bad Redemption off. Athenes, I think, if you wanted to nerf an enchanter item that's too OP, I think it's Athenes or Ardent Censer, because there's no skill in those. There's no active. They just work, and they're just extremely powerful stat checks that just add a lot for, like, no trade-off. So, if they wanted to hit something, I would hit Athenes or Ardent. And maybe enchanters do need to get hit a little bit, but I don't know. Anyways, okay, so overall, pretty good. I like that they're just adding a lot of items to help people figure it out. I think most of their philosophy is on point. I really don't like the spell haste or, like, ability haste thing. I think that if nothing else, it's going to be really confusing, and it feels like it's a bunch of lawyer speak for this is going to be a nerf. The tenacity was great. Jungle items, good idea. Depends on how they execute it. Marksman, they're mostly correct with what they're thinking about marksman, so that's good. Mage, fine. More diversity is good. I think mages are in an okay spot. AP fighter, yes, they do need a little bit more. The Dianas, the Echoes, like, those are really strong champs, but, you know, more cool items for that type of style, sustained AP damage, stuff like, you know, Nashers type of thing could be pretty cool. AD fighters are already really strong. Please don't buff them too much. AD assassins, already strong. Don't buff them. Tanks, okay, they could use a little more love. And enchanters, I guess. But anyways, okay, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this. Be sure to like and subscribe. Check out that item video. I'll have it linked at the beginning and at the end if you want to know my thoughts. like what I think some of the major problems are with League of Legends itemization right now. They are addressing some of them, they're not addressing other things, and then how I would change it, what some theoretical items I would do are. Some of them you might agree with, some of you might disagree with, but hopefully it'll give you some pretty cool ideas to think about in theory craft. But anyways, that's going to be it. Have a good day, and we'll see you next time.